He said he was at a conference 1,000 miles away. He said he had a strategic partner dinner. But I'm standing on the 14th floor of the Mariner's Crown, in a room service uniform, pushing a cart with his favorite wine. The door to room 1408 is cracked open. I know tonight isn't just about an affair. It's about a chain of lies finally exploding. My name is Hadley Foster, and the plush, overly patterned carpet on the 14th floor of the Mariner's Crown Hotel was so thick it absorbed the sound of my betrayal. The only noise was the faint, high-pitched squeak of the room service cart's left wheel and the synthetic hum of the air conditioning. Everything in a place like this is designed to muffle the truth. The walls are thick, the lighting is dim, the air smells vaguely of lemons and industrial cleaner, all of it a conspiracy to maintain a polite, expensive silence. I push the cart, its metal frame cool beneath my palms. Room 1408. Just a few more yards, in my head. I replayed the email he had sent that morning, the one I had read while sitting at our kitchen island, the coffee going cold in my mug. Subject trip update. Weston team. Just landed in Weston Harbor for the Vanguard Ridge Solutions quarterly review. It's going to be a long couple of days. I have a strategic partner dinner tonight, so my phone will be mostly off. We'll check messages in the morning. Best, Daniel Foster. He didn't send it to a team. He sent it only to me, a performance for an audience of one, a strategic partner dinner, 1,000 miles away. Phone off. He was a terrible liar, but he had gotten comfortable. He had gotten lazy. He assumed I was the same woman I was 5 years ago, the one who would have seen that email, sighed with a familiar ache of loneliness, and busied herself with laundry and a streaming subscription, waiting for his call. He had no idea who I had become. My hand tightened on the cart's handle. There was a slight tremor in my right pinky finger, a tiny rebellion of adrenaline I couldn't quite control, but my eyes were clear. I watched the room numbers pass in their polished brass ovals, 1402, 1404. I wasn't a wife about to be blindsided. I wasn't the victim of a shocking discovery. This was not a moment of impulse. This was the final, calculated step in a procedure I had been planning for weeks. I was the one who had ordered this, not just the confrontation, but the food itself, an hour ago, from a burner app on a phone I bought with cash. I had placed this exact order, one bottle of the 2017 Black Stallion Cabernet. He always called it his client closer wine. One plate of charcuterie, heavy on the prosciutto, one slice of the hotel's signature chocolate lava cake. I paid for it with a prepaid credit card I'd been loading for a month. $10 here, $20 there. I knew he wouldn't be able to resist opening the door himself for the Cabernet. He'd be eager, thinking this was some complimentary perk for being a valued rewards member, a status he was so proud of. He was so predictable. That was his greatest weakness. He thought it was mine. I stopped the cart. The brass plaque on the door gleamed under the recessed lighting. 1408, and then I heard it. It wasn't the muted sound of a cable news channel or a sports game. It was a laugh, a woman's laugh. It was low and throaty, cut off too quickly, as if she had covered her mouth. But it was undeniably real. It sliced through the thick, neutral air of the hallway and hit me in the sternum with the force of a physical blow. For a single, agonizing second, all the air left my lungs. This was it. The abstract, the data points, the credit card receipts, and the deleted text messages had just become flesh and blood. A living, breathing person was in that room, laughing with my husband. The pain was sharp, cold, and clarifying. It was immediately followed by a wave of something else, something dark and satisfying, vindication. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a slow, steadying breath. I could smell the rich, fruity aroma of the wine on the cart, mingling with the scent of cured meat and the faint, dusty smell of the polyester uniform I was wearing. The scratchy fabric of the maroon blazer was digging into my neck. I had found it, along with a keycard programmed for the service elevators, in a locker in the staff changing room, exactly where my friend from the hotel's event department had left it for me. Tonight is not just about catching him, I told myself, opening my eyes, My reflection was a distorted blur in the polished brass of the room number. Tonight is not about tears or screaming or asking why. Tonight is about showing him, in front of his strategic partner, exactly who he married. Tonight is the night I show him what it feels like to be underestimated. My knuckles were steady. I raised my hand and knocked. Not the hesitant tap of a wife, but the crisp, efficient rap of an employee. 3 sharp knocks. Rap, rap, rap. I cleared my throat, shifting my voice into a higher, brighter register. The perfect, impersonal cheer of the service industry. "Room service," I called out. The sound strangely loud in the quiet corridor. Inside, the murmur of voices stopped. The sudden silence was absolute. I heard a faint shuffling sound. He was moving toward the door. The small brass peephole went dark. He was looking at me, at the uniform, at the cart. I smiled. A wide, empty, customer service smile, holding up the clipboard with the check. I heard the slide of the deadbolt being drawn back, a heavy metallic thunk that echoed in the silence. The handle turned. The door began to open, swinging inward, pushing a slice of warm yellow light across the carpet. It illuminated the silver bucket on my cart, the condensation beading on the bottle of red wine. I could see a sliver of him, the sleeve of his gray t-shirt, the side of his face, his eyes wide and confused, not yet recognizing me, just processing the cart he hadn't ordered. And right then, as his mouth started to form the words, "I think you have the wrong room," the present ripped apart, and the memory of 7 days ago flooded in, as sharp and clear as the sound of that woman's laugh, the scene in the hallway, the open door, the shocked face. The woman waiting inside froze, suspended in time, because to understand the cold, quiet resolve of the woman standing in that hallway, you had to understand the dinner party that set it all in motion. You had to understand the moment I realized that my humiliation had become a spectator sport for his entire family. I had given him every chance to tell the truth. He chose the lie. Now, it was my turn. 7 days ago, the air in our Maple Crest home wasn't sterile and lemon-scented. It was heavy with the aroma of rosemary-crusted lamb and the balsamic glaze I had spent 2 hours reducing. Our big suburban house in Colorado, usually my sanctuary, felt like a stage set for a play I had never auditioned for. I was, as always, trying too hard. The Fosters were here. This was my monthly performance, dinner for Daniel's family, an attempt to prove, once again, that I was worthy of their golden boy. The table was set with the good china, the silver polished, the wine chilled. I had even bought the ridiculously expensive artisanal bread from the bakery in Cherry Creek. Margaret, my mother-in-law, sat at the head of the table, a position I had ceded to her years ago. She swirled her wine, a Chardonnay she'd brought herself, pointedly ignoring the Zinfandel I had paired with the lamb. "Hadley, the house looks managed," she'd offered upon arrival, which was her version of a compliment. Paul, my father-in-law, was quieter, a man who believed his financial success bought him the right to be perpetually distracted. He was already checking stock tickers on his phone, occasionally grunting at whatever news he saw. And then there was Brielle. Brielle, Dan's younger sister, was a woman who weaponized her insecurities. She wore her toxicity like a designer handbag. She had picked at her salad, pushing the arugula leaves around her plate as if they had personally offended her. I was in the proving I'm worthy phase of our marriage. The Fosters, with their old, quiet Denver money, had always viewed Dan's marriage to me, a woman from a middle-class Ohio family with a simple administrative job, as a temporary lapse in his judgment. I had spent 6 years trying to be enough. I coordinated the family gatherings, remembered their birthdays, bought the thoughtful gifts, and cooked the elaborate meals. I smoothed the rough edges of their family dynamics, and in return, they treated me like the help. "This is wonderful, Hadley," Dan said. Raising his glass, he was in his element. He loved these nights, loved being the center of his family's orbit, loved the easy way he could be both the successful professional and the beloved son. "See, I told you she was a miracle worker." I smiled. That tight, practiced smile. It's just dinner, Dan. Well, it's lovely, Margaret said, taking a sip of her own wine. It's good you have time for this, Hadley, now that Dan is so busy, that Vanguard Ridge Solutions seems to be working him to the bone. The rewards are worth it, Mom, Dan said, beaming. We're closing on the Weston Harbor account next week. It's a game changer. I'll have to fly out. Of course. Another trip? Brielle looked up from her phone, her eyes bright with a familiar, manufactured boredom. Ugh, another business trip. She let out a small, sharp laugh. I just hope this business trip isn't with that blonde assistant again. Sloane. Is it God? She seems exhausting. The clinking of silverware stopped. The silence that fell on the table was heavy and absolute. I looked at Dan. My breath caught in my throat. Waiting. I waited for him to defend me, to defend our marriage. I waited for him to shut his sister down with a sharp, "What are you talking about?" or Brielle. That's wildly inappropriate. He didn't. Dan laughed. A short, arrogant puff of air. He glanced at Brielle, a conspiratorial glint in his eye. Hey, he said, holding his hands up in mock surrender. You know how it is, our client base. They like very close, personal attention. Paul chuckled into his napkin. Margaret smiled. A thin, tight, knowing smile. They were laughing. They were all laughing. In that instant, the floor dropped out from beneath me. The warm, candlelit dining room went ice cold. It wasn't the joke. It was the laughter. It was the casual, shared understanding that passed between them. This wasn't a new thought. This wasn't a shocking accusation. This was a running joke. They had talked about this. They had discussed my husband's potential infidelity, discussed this Sloane behind my back, and now they felt so comfortable in their disdain for me that they could say it in my own home, at my own table, while eating the food I had cooked. No one defended me, not Margaret, who was a woman, not Paul, who was a father, and especially not Dan. My husband, the man who was supposed to be my partner, he hadn't just failed to block the punch, he had joined in, holding me still so his sister could get a better shot. My face was hot, but my hands were steady. I felt the last of my good wife persona crack and fall away. The woman they saw as a decorative, accommodating presence was gone. In her place was someone else, someone cold, someone tired, someone who was, finally, done. I placed my napkin on the table, not crumpled in anger, folded. Excuse me, I said. My voice was perfectly level. It cut through their fading laughter with surgical precision. I stood up. The legs of the dining chair scraped quietly on the hardwood floor. Hadley, honey, where are you going? Dan asked, the laughter still in his voice, oblivious as ever. I just need to get something from the office, I said. I walked out of the dining room. I didn't storm. I walked. I heard Margaret mutter, "Oh, for heaven's sake, she's so sensitive." I went into the small room down the hall that we used as a home office. On my desk, under a stack of paperwork I'd been remotely processing for Vanguard Ridge, was a plain white file folder. It had no label. It had been sitting there for 3 days. It wasn't a DNA test. I didn't need one of those. This was simpler. It was a collection of printed-out credit card statements, airline booking confirmations, and cell phone records, black and white. Irrefutable. I picked it up. It was light in my hand, but it felt as heavy as a brick. I walked back into the dining room. All eyes were on me. Dan's smile had faded, replaced by a flicker of irritation. Hadley, what is this? We have guests, he said, using his manager voice. I stood at the head of the table, in the spot where Margaret usually sat. I looked at Brielle, at her smug, expectant face. I looked at Margaret, her expression one of pure annoyance. I looked at Paul, who just looked confused. Finally, I looked at Dan. You're right, Dan. We do have guests, I said. And everyone seems so fascinated by your business trips tonight. I tossed the white folder onto the table. It landed with a soft, definitive thwack in the center, just missing the butter dish. "If we're going to talk about your work," I said, my voice quiet, "then let's really talk about it. Open this." The room went dead silent. Brielle's smirk vanished. Margaret's eyes widened, her condescension replaced by genuine shock. Paul actually put his phone down. But Dan's face was the masterpiece. The blood drained from it instantly. The confident, charming golden boy evaporated, replaced by a pale, cornered animal. He stared at the white folder as if it were a snake. He didn't know what was inside, not exactly, but he knew, in that split second, that I was no longer playing the part. He recognized that I had, at last, seen the truth of at least one lie. The scene hung there, suspended. The folder sat on the table, a white bomb waiting for someone to pull the pin. It didn't start with a scream. It started with a ping. The tiny, electronic chime of a push notification from our joint credit card app. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters after dinner. It was a Tuesday night, about 6 weeks before the disastrous family dinner. Dan was, according to his own text message sent that morning, in Des Moines, Iowa, for a 2-day seminar on next-gen logistics. The notification was for a $112 charge at a restaurant. The Gilded Shell, in Weston Harbor. I stared at the phone. My first thought wasn't a fare. My first thought was fraud. I almost called him to say, "Hey, someone's cloned our card." But I stopped. Des Moines. Weston Harbor. My internal map spun. Iowa. A city on a bay, landlocked, coastal. The two places were 1,000 miles apart. It was just a little thing, a glitch in the matrix, a detail so small any normal person would dismiss it, a bank error, a delayed charge from an old trip, but I was, as Dan and his mother so often reminded me, detail-oriented. They meant it as an insult. They meant I was neurotic. I put the phone down. I finished wiping the counter. I went to bed. But I didn't sleep. The next morning, after he'd sent a cheerful, "Morning-long day ahead," text still presumably from Iowa, I opened my laptop. I used to work in administration at a similar-sized tech firm before I went remote freelance. And I knew something Dan had forgotten. I knew a company like Vanguard Ridge Solutions doesn't run on the calendar. A husband tells his wife. It runs on the one logged in the central HR portal for travel and insurance purposes. I had bookmarked the portal login page 3 years ago when I helped him file a complex insurance claim. His password, which I'd been required to use, was, predictably, Foster Golden Boy 22. I told myself I was just checking to see if the Weston Harbor trip had been logged and the Des Moines one was a mistake, just being a good, detail-oriented wife. I logged in. His password still worked. I clicked on Travel Itinerary. There was no seminar in Des Moines. There was no trip to Iowa logged for the entire quarter. There was, however, a booked and approved trip for 2 nights at the Mariner's Crown in Weston Harbor, dated for the exact days he was supposedly in Des Moines, the purpose field, which was required, just said, Client Relations, S. Mercer, Sloan Mercer, the blonde assistant Brielle had mentioned, the one who, according to Dan, was just a kid, practically an intern. I went to Instagram. Her profile was public. Of course it was. It was a curated gallery of soft glam selfies, rooftop bar cocktails, and inspirational quotes. I scrolled back 6 weeks. There it was, a story, now expired. But I'd seen it at the time. A picture of a hotel room, a glass of champagne on the table, the view outside a blurry cityscape at night, overlooking a marina, the caption, "Sometimes work is a perk, Weston Harbor." At the time, I had felt a tiny, ugly pang of jealousy. She gets to travel to the coast, and I'm here scheduling a plumber. Now, seeing it through the lens of the credit card charge and the HR portal, my blood ran cold. The view from her story was the exact view pictured on the Mariner's Crown's gallery page, a charge for dinner for 2, a hotel room with a view, A client relations trip with his assistant on the same days he was lying about being in a different state. This wasn't a glitch. This was a system, the physical clues, which I had been subconsciously logging and dismissing for months, all clicked into place. The way he'd come home late from the office smelling, not of his own cologne or the city's exhaust, but of a neutral, industrial soap, the kind you only find in hotel bathrooms and gyms. The starched, perfect press of his shirts when he claimed he'd just pulled an all-nighter at his desk. Vanguard Ridge didn't have a dry cleaning service, but the Mariner's Crown did. His excuses became transparent overnight. These East Coast clients just need the personal touch, he would say, exasperated, as he packed a carry-on. His company was remote first. 95% of their business was conducted over Zoom. But I had wanted to believe him. I had wanted to be the supportive, low-maintenance wife his family expected. My first impulse, even then, was to confront him, to lay the phone on the kitchen table, open to the credit card charge, and just wait. But then I remembered. Clear as day. A fight we'd had last year. I'd found a receipt for a jewelry store, just a simple silver bracelet in his coat pocket right before Christmas. It wasn't my gift. When I asked him, my voice trembling, who it was for, he hadn't gotten defensive. He'd gotten sad. He'd looked at me with such profound disappointment, as if I had broken his heart. Hadley, he'd said, his voice soft and wounded. It was for the team intern. Her mother passed away. We all chipped in. I can't believe you'd think that. Wow. I guess I know what you think of me now. He made me feel small. He made me feel insane. He turned my valid suspicion into a character flaw. I ended up apologizing to him. The memory of that apology, of the shame and confusion he had so expertly manufactured, stopped me. No, I would not ask him. I would not give him the chance to wield his gaslighting. I would not give him the chance to perform his sadness or his disappointment. I would, instead, gather evidence. I would treat this not as a marital dispute, but as a civil case. I would build it slowly, quietly, with no warning. The next trip he announced was Weston Harbor, the one for next week, the one he told his family about at that dinner. This time, he was telling the truth about the city, but lying about the purpose. It's a huge pitch. He'd said, looking me right in the eye. The whole team will be there. Will Sloan be there? I asked, my voice light. Just another detail. He laughed. Probably. Someone has to take the notes. Don't worry. I'll be in meetings from dawn till dusk. It's going to be brutal. The next day, I made the call. I dialed the main number for the Mariner's Crown in Weston Harbor. I put on my best, brightest, most efficient assistant voice. Hi there, I chirped. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Daniel Foster from Vanguard Ridge Solutions. I'm just confirming his travel arrangements for next week. I have him checking in on the 10th. Can you just confirm that booking is all set? The receptionist tapped on her keyboard. Yep, I see it right here. Mr. Daniel Foster, checking in on the 10th for 2 nights, King Suite, Bay View. Looks like we have a note here. A request for a bottle of the Black Stallion Cabernet to be sent up after check-in. My heart stopped. The Cabernet. His wine. Oh, perfect, I said, my voice not wavering. That's wonderful. And can you just confirm, is there a second room booked under that name, or with Vanguard Ridge Solutions? I just want to make sure his colleague is on the same floor. More tapping. No, I don't see another booking for Vanguard Ridge, but I do see a note on Mr. Foster's reservation. A second guest is listed on the room, a Ms. Sloan Mercer. Is that who you were looking for? It was a physical sensation, a click, a cold, heavy tumbler falling into place, locking the last of my doubts away for good. He wasn't just cheating. He wasn't just lying. He was putting her on the reservation. He was booking a king suite with a bay view and pre-ordering his favorite wine for a romantic evening with his assistant, all on the company's dime, all while telling me he was working brutally hard for our future. He didn't just think I was stupid. He thought I was irrelevant. He didn't fear getting caught. He was so secure in his position as the golden boy, so insulated by his family's adoration and my perceived weakness, that he didn't even feel the need to be a good liar. He felt safe. That's when I understood. A private confrontation would be pointless. He would just find a way to make it my fault. The only way to punish a man who lives for the approval of others is to take it away, publicly. My target shifted. It wasn't just him anymore. It was the people who laughed. It was Brielle, with her casual cruelty. It was Margaret, with her thin, knowing smile. It was all of them. The pain didn't go away, but it transformed. It crystallized. It turned from a messy, hot grief into something cold, hard, and perfectly sharp. I wasn't just a wife. I was an administrator, and I was about to conduct the most thorough audit of his life. I operate on facts. It's what my brain defaults to. And in the 3 days between that phone call to the Mariner's Crown and the family dinner, I became the most diligent paralegal in my own life's lawsuit. The first step was printing. I sat in our quiet home office, the printer whirring rhythmically, spitting out the last 3 months of our joint credit card statements. I took a yellow highlighter, not a red pen. This wasn't about passion. It was about accounting, and I began to draw neat, bright lines. There it was, the gilded shell. $112. Weston Harbor, date August 4th, here. 2. A charge for Bayline Hotel in San Francisco, $460, date July 9th. He had told me he was in Phoenix for that trip, and another a charge for 2 tickets to a concert at the Fillmore. I knew he hated that band. I also knew, from a quick scroll of her Instagram, that Sloan Mercer loved them. I was methodical. I cross-referenced everything. I went back into the Vanguard Ridge portal. On July 9th, the day he was supposedly in Phoenix but was actually at the Bayline Hotel, I found his official company calendar. It was blocked out for client pitch remote. I dug deeper, into his sent emails. I found it a company-wide Zoom invitation for an all-hands strategy meeting sent by Dan himself, scheduled for exactly 10 a.m. Mountain Time on July 9th. He hadn't been on a plane. He had been right here, in this house, probably in this very office, on a video call with his entire team, while lying to me about being in a different state. He was juggling lies so casually, he didn't even bother to cover his digital tracks. He was at home, lying to me, while the San Francisco charge was pending. I printed the Zoom invitation. I printed the HR travel log showing no travel. I placed it next to the credit card statement from the Bayline Hotel, a neat stack. Next, I went back to Sloan's Instagram. The Weston Harbor story was long gone, but I had taken a screenshot. The high-resolution image on my phone captured it all: the specific lampshade, the pattern on the curtains, the exact angle of the marina lights. It was a digital fingerprint, and I saved it to a secure, cloud-based drive under a folder named Taxes. I logged into our shared American Airlines app. We had linked our accounts years ago to pool our miles. A smart financial move, Dan had called it. I looked at his past trips. Des Moines, August 4th, canceled. The flight had been booked, and then, just days before, canceled. But he had never mentioned a cancellation. He had played out the entire charade. He had packed. He had driven to the airport. He had sent a text saying boarding. He hadn't just omitted the truth. He had actively constructed an elaborate, fictional replacement for it. I took a screenshot of the cancellation email. It went into the Taxes folder and onto the printer. I realized I wasn't just dealing with lies. I was dealing with logistics. I needed to understand the physical traces he left. I thought about keycards. I called my friend Jen, who works in corporate security for a downtown high-rise. "Hey, Jen, weird question," I said, pacing the kitchen. "How long do you guys keep key fob logs for building entry?" "Logs," she said. Depends. Why?" "Just a work thing." I lied, the irony stinging. "We're auditing TE, and I'm trying to see if I can match building entry logs to Uber receipts to bust a guy who's padding his expenses." "Oh, that?" she laughed. "Smart. Yeah, we keep them for 90 days. Usually, we can pull a report on any fob, any door, any time. It's all just data. Why you want me to show you how to read a log file? I might, actually, I said. I'm learning to find the traces. I hung up. I didn't need to see Dan's logs. The call itself was enough. It armed me. It confirmed that this data existed. He was leaving a digital and physical trail of breadcrumbs every single day, completely oblivious. I gathered the printouts, the highlighted statements, the conflicting travel itineraries, the Zoom invite, the screenshot of Sloane's hotel room, the canceled flight confirmation. Each piece of paper was a separate, undeniable fact. I put them all into a plain white folder, not a manila envelope, not a binder, a sterile, white, legal-style folder with no logo. It looked exactly like the kind of envelope that would contain a DNA test or a subpoena. It was clean, professional, impersonal. Then, I went back to the printer. I printed a second, identical set, and a third. This was strategy. Copy 1 was for the dinner party. That was the warning shot, the one I would place on the table to watch the blood drain from his face, the one I knew his family would see. Copy 2 was for the car. I would put it in the glove compartment. This was the contingency plan, in case Dan, in his panic, tried to accidentally spill a glass of Cabernet on the first one, or snatch it and tear it up. It showed I was one step ahead. Copy 3 went into a large envelope and was slid into our home safe, behind my grandmother's jewelry and our passports. That was the insurance policy, the one for the lawyers. As I clicked the safe shut, the emotional landscape inside me settled. The hot, messy grief of the first discovery had cooled. The frantic, anxious digging had stopped. I felt the pain, yes, but it was no longer a fire. It was a block of ice. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a plaintiff, and I had just finished my discovery. I realized, with a clarity that was almost terrifying, that I didn't need to scream at him. I didn't need to cry. I didn't need to ask why. I had the what, the where, the when, and the who. I had the truth, and the truth, printed, highlighted, and collated, was a weapon. I decided, in that moment, how this would go. I would let him walk into the ambush of that family dinner. I would use that white folder to destroy his credibility in front of the only audience he truly cared about. I would let him sweat. I would let him panic and squirm and try to lie his way out of it, and then, just when he thought the worst was over, I would let him go on his business trip. I would let him walk into his king suite at the Mariner's Crown, and I would save the biggest, most humiliating slap for last. I would deliver the verdict not in our home, but in his. How does a person get here? How does a marriage corrode so badly that a wife ends up in a borrowed uniform, pushing a cart of decoy wine toward her husband's hotel room? It happens slowly. Then all at once, I remember the man I married. That Dan Foster didn't exist anymore, but I remember him. He was funny. He was hardworking, but in a grounded way. He'd come home from his junior associate job smelling like stale office coffee and takeout, and we'd collapse on our tiny apartment sofa, and he'd be present. He was sweet. He traveled, but it was for a trade show in Omaha or a quarterly meeting in Kansas City. He'd come back with a cheap airport souvenir and complaints about the hotel's instant coffee. He was in the minor leagues. Everything changed when he got the call from Vanguard Ridge Solutions. It was his big break, the move to the show. Suddenly, he wasn't just Dan. He was Daniel Foster, senior client manager. With the title came the perks, and with the perks came the flight privileges. His clients weren't in Omaha anymore. They were in San Francisco, New York, Weston Harbor, and his family. God, they loved it. They drank it up. His success was their success. Dan, their golden boy, was finally shining the way he was meant to. His travel wasn't a burden on our marriage. It was a badge of his importance. I remember a conversation with Margaret, my mother-in-law, maybe 2 years ago, back when I was still naive enough to voice my loneliness. I'd mentioned Dan was gone for the third weekend that month. "Oh, Hadley, don't be dramatic," she'd said, not even looking up from her gardening magazine. It's normal for men of his caliber to travel. Paul was gone all the time at that age. It's what successful men do. You should be proud, not complaining. She didn't just dismiss my feelings, she pathologized them. I wasn't a lonely wife. I was a complaining one. She had, in one breath, given her son a blanket endorsement. She'd turned his absence into a virtue. That was the green light. And Dan, he took it and floored it. Slowly, my valid concerns about our lack of connection, my reminders about boundaries, my requests for a weekend at home, they stopped being conversations. They became noise. I became a pesky annoyance he had to manage. My texts became needy. My desire for his time became unreasonable. He started to treat me the way he treated a low-priority email, something to be flagged and dealt with later. Or, preferably, ignored until it went away, and I let him. That's the part that's hardest to admit. I let him. I was so desperate to be accepted by the Fosters, to prove I wasn't the Ohio administrative assistant they'd written me off as. I wanted to be the good wife. So, I ignored the red flags. I ignored the way he'd check his phone at dinner, angle it away from me, and give that same half-laugh he gave Brielle. I ignored the last-minute trips that always seemed to pop up on a Friday. I ignored the smell of hotel soap. I ignored it all because confronting it meant admitting the marriage I'd built my life around was a lie. It meant facing his family not as the supportive wife, but as the sensitive one. So I kept the peace. I kept up appearances. I smiled at the dinners and cooked the lamb. Then came that dinner. The one where Brielle dropped her little poison dart about Sloane and Dan. Dan laughed. That laugh was the sound of my entire world breaking. In that second, I saw everything with perfect, sickening clarity. He wasn't laughing at a joke. He was laughing with his pack. He had chosen them. He had chosen his position as the golden boy over his role as my husband. He was more afraid of losing his family's approval than he was of losing me. He didn't just fail to protect me. He actively participated in my humiliation. He held me down. That's when I understood. A private punishment would do nothing. A tearful confrontation in our bedroom would just be another annoyance for him to manage. He'd unleash his performative disappointment. He'd tell me I was crazy, insecure, overreacting. He'd gaslight me until I apologized for his betrayal. No, the punishment had to fit the crime. The crime wasn't just infidelity. The crime was public disrespect. The punishment, therefore, had to be public humiliation. He cared about his image, I would shatter it. He cared about his family's adoration, I would turn it to ash. He cared about his professional reputation, I would put a crack in it he could never repair. My plan began to form, not just as a way to catch him, but as a performance piece, a play, in 3 acts. Act 1. The dinner party. That was the warning shot. The white folder on the table was to let him, and his family, know that I was no longer playing their game. I wanted them to see the system of his lies. This wasn't a lo mieng, a one-time slip-up. This was a pattern. This was a calculated, long-term fraud. Act 2. The anticipation, letting him sweat, letting him think he'd dodged the bullet, letting him walk right into the trip to Weston Harbor. Act 3. The finale, at the Mariner's Crown. In front of his strategic partner, I also, very clearly, set my own boundaries. This was not a spiral into madness. This was a controlled demolition. My war was with Dan, and by extension, the adults who enabled him. There would be no violence. There would be no unhinged screaming in a lobby. I thought of Sam, the little boy who lived next door, who sometimes came over for popsicles. If this fire I was starting somehow singed him, or any other innocent, I would be the first one there to protect them. My boundaries were clear: no violence, no collateral damage to children. My fight was with the man who thought he was untouchable. The goal shifted. It was no longer about saving the marriage. It was about executing a sentence. He had treated me like I was stupid. He had treated me like I was invisible. He had treated me like I didn't matter. In front of the very people whose opinions he valued most, I was simply going to return the favor. The week after the dinner party was a masterpiece of domestic theater. The white folder, having done its job of planting a bomb of paranoia, was never mentioned. Dan was a wreck. He spent the first 2 days oscillating between forced, brittle cheerfulness. "Hey, what are you up to?" and sullen silences. He was terrified to ask me what was in the folder, and I was in no hurry to tell him. I was letting him marinate in his own fear. By Wednesday, he had convinced himself it was a false alarm, a mood swing of mine. He was desperate to believe I was just sensitive. He needed to believe I was the one with the problem. So when Thursday came, I played my part. I found him in the bedroom, zipping up his black carry-on, the one he always took for overnighters. "So, Weston Harbor is still on for tomorrow?" I asked, my voice light. I was leaning against the doorframe, holding a mug of coffee. He visibly relaxed. This was familiar territory. This was Hadley, the planner, the wife. "Yeah," he said, not quite meeting my eye. "It's the big one. Going to be brutal, but we should land the account. Have you booked your hotel yet?" I asked, taking a sip. "I have a ton of points at that chain. I could book it for you, save the company some money, maybe even get you an upgrade." This was the test. He shook his head, a little too quickly. No, don't worry about it. Vanguard Ridge. They have a corporate rate. They booked it. It's all handled." Check. He wasn't just going. He was controlling the reservation. He had confirmed he was walking into the trap I'd already scouted. "Okay," I said, shrugging. "Just thought I'd offer, try to get some sleep tonight." The next morning, I made my own calls. First, I dialed the Mariner's Crown. I put on my best friend voice, all breathless excitement. "Hi," I said to the concierge. "Oh my gosh, I hope you can help me. My best friend's husband, Daniel Foster, is checking in today for a business trip, and it's their anniversary tomorrow. I know, he's a total bonehead for traveling, right? But I want to send a surprise to his room, like champagne or something. Can you just confirm he's checking in? I don't want to send it if his plans changed." The woman on the line was sugary sweet. "That is so thoughtful. Let me see. Yes, Mr. Daniel Foster. We have him in our system. Check-in is for this afternoon." "Oh, perfect," I gushed. "I just need the room number so I can tell the delivery service." "Oh," she hesitated. "We can't give out room numbers over the phone. Ma'am, privacy policy." "Oh, no, of course," I said, laughing as if I were a silly goose. "I'll just have it sent to the front desk. But you know what? I'm already on the phone with the hotel's private events caterer. She's a friend. Can I just tell her the room number when you assign it? It's a surprise. His name is Daniel Foster. Room. What was it you told me last week, 1408? Yes. I'm pretty sure he told me it was 1408. A pause. Tapping. Yes, ma'am, she said, her voice lowering conspiratorially. I see the pre-assigned room here. 1408. You're all set. You're a lifesaver, I said. Check. My next call was to Jen, my friend from hotel events, not the corporate security one, but the one who actually worked at the Mariner's Crown. Jen, it's Hadley, I said, my voice dropping back to normal. Is it a go? You are insane. You know that. Jen's voice was a whisper. But yeah, I've got a maroon blazer and slacks from an extra room service uniform. It's in a garment bag in locker 212 in the employee changing room. The code is 1224. There's a spare master keycard for the service elevators in the pocket. It'll get you up, but it won't open his room. You're on your own for that. I don't need it to open his room, I said. He'll do that himself. Thank you. Jen, I owe you. Big. Just don't get caught, she said. And Hadley, burn him to the ground. Check. Finally, I established my alibi. I opened my phone and sent a text to the one person who would document it, Margaret. Hey, Margaret. Just wanted to let you know Dan is off to Weston Harbor again for that big client. He's working so hard I'll be home alone tonight, so I'll probably just rent a movie. Hope you're well. Her reply came back in minutes. He is a good boy. Try to keep yourself busy. Dear. Perfect. She was now a state's witness for the prosecution. At 4 p.m. Dan stood at the front door. He was back to his old self, confident the Hadley problem had been solved. He gave me a quick, perfunctory kiss on the cheek. His carry-on bag was by his feet. Okay, I'm off, he said. Wish me luck? Good luck, I said, smiling. Land the account. He had no idea. He had no idea that tucked into the small, zippered lining of that very carry-on was a brand new, fully charged AirTag. I had slipped it in 2 days ago while looking for a lost sock in his closet. I didn't leave immediately. That was for amateurs. I let him get to the airport. I let him go through security. I opened the Find My app and watched his little icon crawl across the map to the Denver International Airport. I watched it sit at gate B32. I watched it take off. I gave him a full hour's head start after his flight landed in Weston Harbor. I waited until I saw the icon leave the airport and start moving toward the downtown hotel district. Only when the AirTag pinged Mariner's Crown, 1400 Bay Street, did I move. I got in my own car. The drive to Weston Harbor was only 2 hours, a drive he could have made any time, but he always chose to fly. For the status, the sun was setting, painting the sky in angry shades of orange and purple. I put my phone in the console, opened the voice memo app, and pressed play. The sound of my own dining room filled the car. I heard my own voice. Just dinner, Dan. I heard his miracle worker. And then I heard Brielle's, hope this business trip isn't with that blonde assistant again. I listened to the silence. I listened to Dan's laugh. They like very close, personal attention. I listened to Paul's chuckle. I listened to Margaret's silence, her complicity. I listened to the recording 3 times in a row, letting the humiliation, the rage, the cold, clarifying focus wash over me. I wasn't the trembling wife anymore. I was an instrument of justice. I pulled into the city, parking in a public garage 3 blocks from the hotel. As I was getting out of the car, I sent one last text. It was to Jen. Plan is in motion. I'm going dark. If you do not get an I'm out text from me by 11 p.m., call hotel security. Tell them you heard a loud domestic dispute in room 1408. Tell them it's a husband and wife. Make sure you say no children are present. Checkmate. I put my phone on silent, zipped it into my jacket pocket, and walked toward the Mariner's Crown. The night was cool. The salty air from the bay felt good on my face. The trap was set. The bait was taken. The lion was in the cage, admiring the view. And he didn't even know the door was locked. My initial investigation had a clear villain, Sloane Mercer. She was the cliché, the millennial assistant in her mid-20s, all high-gloss lipstick and filters. A predator, I thought, or at least a willing accomplice. She was the obvious, easy target for my rage. But as I dug deeper into the Vanguard Ridge portal, in the days between the dinner party and Dan's departure, I realized Sloane was just a symptom. The disease was Dan, but the infection, that ran deeper. I was looking at the expense report for the Des Moines trip, the one that was actually Weston Harbor 6 weeks ago. I saw the charge for the Mariner's Crown, room and tax, expensed by Daniel Foster, but right below it, on the same expense report for the same dates, was another charge. Mariner's Crown, room and tax, expensed by Gavin Wood. Gavin Wood, Dan's boss, the head of the entire client relations division, a man Dan worshipped, a man I'd met at 2 company Christmas parties, who had shaken my hand and told me I was a lucky woman to have a star like Dan. 2 rooms, both expensed to the same client relations S. Mercer project code. My mind raced. What did this mean? Was Gavin also having an affair, or was he there with them? Was this a team-building exercise I couldn't possibly comprehend? The simplest answer was often the truest. Gavin was there. He knew. He was either participating in his own way or, at the very least, sanctioning this. He was the alibi. This changed everything. This wasn't just a husband cheating on his wife. This was a senior manager and his direct report faking travel. booking adjoining rooms, and billing the company for their trysts. This wasn't just adultery, this was fraud. I understood, with the clarity of a lightning strike, that if I pulled this thread, I wouldn't just unravel my marriage. I could unravel Dan's entire career. I could take down his boss. This was a nuclear bomb, and I had been planning to use it to kill a fly. For a moment, I paused. My finger hovered over the print button for Gavin's expense report, and then I stopped. No, not tonight. Tonight was not about Vanguard Ridge Solutions. It was not about Gavin Wood or corporate malfeasance. Tonight was about what happened in my home. Tonight was about the laughter at my dinner table, the professional angle. That was a different weapon, for a different fight. That was my leverage for the divorce. That was the ace I would keep, untouched, in my back pocket. Tonight, I would stick to the personal, because in my digging, I had found something far more potent, far more intimate than a falsified expense report. I had found the texts. Dan and I shared an iCloud account. To sync our calendars, honey, he'd said years ago, but it also synced his iMessages, right before he got smart and turned it off. But he hadn't been smart enough. Soon enough, the backups were still there, buried in the cloud. I sat at my desk at 2 a.m, the house silent, and I read the flirtations, the you up texts, the can't wait replies. I read the logistics, the room numbers, the flight times, and then I found the one that made my blood freeze. It was from Sloan, dated about 4 months prior, the week he'd told me he was stuck in Denver because of a blizzard. Sloan. That was way too close. When your wife called the front desk at the Denver Hyatt, I almost had a heart attack. Dan, she was just checking on the flight. She's neurotic. Don't worry about it. Sloan. You'd better be right. Last time I almost got caught by a wife. It didn't end well. Dan, I'm not him, and she's not her. I told you. Hadley doesn't have a clue. She trusts me. She's neurotic. He had used my concern, my one check-in call during a supposed blizzard, as a punchline. He had used it as a way to bond with his mistress, to paint me as the crazy, paranoid wife, while he was, in fact, in a hotel room with another woman. He had mocked my care. He had mocked my trust. And then, the final piece clicked into place. Brielle. Her joke at the dinner party. I just hope this business trip isn't with that blonde assistant again. It hadn't been a random, bitchy guess. It hadn't come from nowhere. That dinner was the first time I'd ever heard the name Sloan spoken aloud in our home. But Brielle knew it. She had said it with such casual confidence. Because it was gossip. Because it was a story. Someone, maybe another employee at Vanguard Ridge, maybe a friend of a friend had talked. The Denver incident, the neurotic wife calling the hotel. The story had gotten out. Dan's crazy wife had almost blown up his spot. My humiliation wasn't just a private suspicion. It was a rumor. It was a joke they were all in on. And when Brielle said it, she wasn't guessing. She was testing. She was poking the bear, delighting in a secret that I was the last to know. And Dan's laugh had confirmed it. He was laughing because the story was, to him, just a funny, close call. My entire family. No, his entire family had been invited to laugh at my expense. My motive, which had been a cold, hard diamond, now had a core of pure fire. This was not about a physical betrayal. I could, eventually, have processed the sex. This was about a betrayal of the mind. It was about the systematic, arrogant, and gleeful disrespect for my intelligence. He didn't just lie to me. He held me in contempt. I right-clicked. I selected the text message thread. I clicked print. I didn't bother to redact the phone numbers. I folded the printed-out iMessages Sloan's near panic. Dan's chilling reassurance that I was too stupid to ever catch on, and I slid them into the new white folder I was preparing, the one I would be carrying with me, tucked into the waistband of my borrowed polyester pants. This was the evidence for the hotel room. The expense reports and the flight itineraries were for the family, but for Sloan, and for Dan. In that room, they were going to get the highlight reel of their own sordid collaboration. The days between the dinner party and Dan's departure for Weston Harbor were a masterclass in psychological warfare. The house was quiet, but it was a sick, heavy quiet, laced with unspoken accusations. Dan was a ghost in his own home, walking on eggshells, waiting for the other shoe to drop. He never asked about the white folder. He was too afraid of the answer, and I, in turn, did nothing. I was the perfect, placid, slightly wounded wife. I was letting the silence and his own guilty conscience do the work for me. He needed to believe he was safe before he walked into the execution. 2 nights before he was set to leave, I made pasta, just a simple, inoffensive bolognese, no rosemary-crusted lamb, no performance. We sat at the kitchen island, the silence punctuated only by the clinking of our forks. He kept looking at me, trying to gauge my mood. I gave him nothing. Finally, I put my fork down. "About the other night," I said. My voice was small. He froze, his hand halfway to his wine glass. "Yeah, the folder." I looked down at my plate, as if I were ashamed. "I shouldn't have done that. Dan, it wasn't the place. It was tacky." He was silent. He was processing. This was a new move. "It's just," I let my voice waver a little. Brielle's comment. It got to me. It's not the first time she's made a crack like that. And, I don't know. I looked up, and I made sure my eyes were watery. I'd seen some confusing things on the credit card, and with the flights, and I got in my head. I thought, I don't know what I thought. I just felt like everyone was laughing at me. I let him see the emotional woman, the overly sensitive wife he and his mother were so convinced I was. I overreacted," I whispered. "I'm sorry. I made it weird." A long, slow breath hissed out of him. It was the sound of 1,000 pounds of pressure being released. He hadn't been caught. He hadn't been exposed. He had just scared his neurotic, insecure wife. He actually chuckled, a low, patronizing sound. "Oh, Hadley," he said, shaking his head. He reached across the island and put his hand over mine. It felt like a spider. "Honey, you scared me. I don't know. I thought you were actually accusing me of something." I guess I was," I said, playing my part. "No," he said, his voice taking on that firm manager tone, the one he used when he was explaining something very simple to a very stupid person. "You were confused. Look, my job is complicated. Things change last minute. Flights get rebooked. I have to cover for Gavin on my card sometimes when he hits his limit. We move money around. It's a mess. It's not what it looks like from the outside." He squeezed my hand. "These trips, this Weston Harbor trip, they are brutal. But they are for us, for our future, for this house, for the life we're building. All I need from you is to trust me. Can you do that? Can you just trust me?" I looked at his earnest, lying face. I catalogued the excuses. Cover for Gavin. Complicated. Not what it looks like. For us. I filed them all away. They would be perfect for my speech in room 1408. "I'll try," I said, giving him a small, watery smile. "That's my girl," he said. And he was, for the first time in a week, completely relaxed. The next day, I built my social alibi. I sent a text to Margaret. "Hey, Margaret, Dan is packing for his big Weston Harbor trip tomorrow. He seems a little stressed about it, so I'm trying to be extra supportive. I think that dinner party was a wake-up call for me. Going to make him a nice breakfast." Her reply was, predictably, smug. "That's good, dear. He has enough on his mind. He needs a partner. Not a problem." That evening, Dan, high on his own perceived victory, decided to reassure me. He forwarded me an email. Subject FWD, your flight to Weston Harbor, AA 451. His text followed. "See, just so you have peace of mind. One simple, round-trip ticket. Wheels up at 9 a.m. I'll be in meetings all night. I'll call you when I can." I looked at the itinerary. It was a real booking. A flight he would, I was sure, cancel at the last possible second. Eating the fee. It was his decoy. The piece of evidence he would use to prove I was crazy if I ever brought it up again. He was so proud of himself. He was so stupid. I texted back a single red heart emoji. The next morning, after he left that quick, dismissive kiss, the wish me luck, before he walked out the door, I didn't immediately bolt. I made a pot of tea. I sat at the kitchen island and answered 3 work emails. I looked up at the little white Nest camera he'd installed in the corner of the living room, the one he'd said was for security. I knew he checked the feed. He was the kind of man who would, I wanted him to see, if he looked, that his wife was exactly where she was supposed to be, at home, tending the fire, being good, after a full normal hour. I went to my desk. I opened the bottom drawer. Beneath the hanging files and old tax returns, I took out a small, slim, black object, a digital voice recorder, no bigger than a pen. I had paid $80 in cash for it at an electronics store 2 towns over. I clicked it on. The battery was full. The memory was empty. I pictured the room service cart Jen had described, the metal underside of the top tray, a small piece of gaff tape, and this little device would be the silent, perfect witness. I didn't need it for a court. I didn't need it for a lawyer. I needed it for me. I wanted to have the audio of his voice when he saw me. I wanted to capture the exact moment his entire world, the one built on trust and our future, came crashing down. I wanted to record the sound of his panic. I slipped the recorder into my purse, next to the folded, printed-out iMessages from Sloan. Men always say, it's fine. They say, don't worry. Stop thinking so much. I've got it handled. They build a world where everything is fine, because their comfort is the only thing that's real. That day, I let him believe in that world one last time. The drive to Weston Harbor was a 2-hour tunnel of darkness, punctuated by the rhythmic, hypnotic thwack, thwack, thwack of the highway lane dividers. Red taillights flared ahead of me, a river of strangers all heading into the night. But I felt utterly, completely alone, and in control. I wasn't sad. The tears for this marriage had already been shed. Weeks ago, in the dark of my own bedroom, where they were silent and unseen. This was something else. This was a humming, vibrating energy, a cocktail of pure, cold adrenaline and a white-hot sense of purpose. It was the feeling of an engine, perfectly tuned, about to be redlined. I was a missile, and I had finally locked on target. I pulled off the highway at the downtown Marina exit, just as I had planned. I bypassed the hotel's main entrance, with its brightly lit, multi-tiered fountain and parade of circling taxis. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't even a person. I was a function. I turned into the staff parking garage, a concrete, low-ceilinged structure 2 blocks away. As Jen had instructed, I pulled into a spot in the darkest corner, section G4, next to a dented blue sedan. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was absolute. I sat there for a moment, just breathing. In, out. Then I moved. Jen's text had been simple. Gray Honda Accord. Section G4. Trunk is unlocked. Key is on the back left tire. I got out of my car, walked to the Honda, knelt, and slid my fingers onto the cold rubber of the tire. The single key was taped there. I unlocked the trunk. Inside, there was no garment bag. It was just a black plastic trash bag, folded and taped shut. It was wonderfully anonymous. I took the bag back to my car, got in the back seat, and locked the doors. The dome light was off, in the near-total darkness. I undid the tape. Inside, I could smell the faint, industrial laundry scent of the uniform, 1 maroon blazer, 1 pair of black polyester slacks, 1 black bow tie. I changed quickly, my movements economical and precise. My own clothes, my jeans, my sweater were folded neatly and put in my own trunk. I pulled my hair back into a tight, severe bun at the nape of my neck. No stray hairs, nothing soft, nothing me. And then, the last piece. I reached for my left hand. My fingers slid over the cool, smooth platinum of my engagement ring and my wedding band. 2 simple, elegant symbols of a life that had turned out to be a complex, elegant lie. I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel a pang of sentimentality. I slid them both off, the skin underneath pale and indented. They were just objects. They were shackles. And I was, at last, taking them off. I dropped them into the coin holder in my car's center console. They made a small, pathetic clink. Tonight, I was not a wife. I slid the folded, printed iMessages into my waistband, flat against my stomach. I put the small, pen-sized voice recorder in the blazer's breast pocket. I grabbed the borrowed employee keycard and my own car key, locked my car, and walked toward the hotel. I entered through the staff entrance, a heavy steel door in an alley that smelled of stale beer and old grease. The keycard Jen had given me buzzed the lock open on the first try. I walked through a maze of concrete hallways, past the clatter of the main kitchen, past a break room where a few people in kitchen whites were smoking and staring at their phones. No one looked at me twice. A uniform is the most powerful invisibility cloak in the world. I found the food-beverage service area for room service. A man with a clipboard was yelling at a busboy in Spanish. "I need a cart and a setup for 1408, I said, my voice clipped and bored. "I'm helping with the late shift. They've been waiting." 1408, he grunted, not looking up. "I don't have that on my board." "Well, it's on my board," I said, with a snap of authority I didn't know I possessed. The desk just called it in, a Cabernet, a charcuterie, and a lava cake. VIP, let's go. I'm not getting yelled at because you lost the chit. His eyes widened in annoyance, not at me, but at the system. Fine. Take cart 3. The wine's in the chiller. Get it yourself. I smiled. Thank you. I assembled the tray, the bottle of Black Stallion, the plate of meats and cheeses, covered in plastic wrap, the small, sad-looking cake. It was a tray for an affair. It was banal. Before I put it on the cart, I checked my phone one last time. I opened the Find My app. The little icon for Dan's carry-on was pulsing steadily. Location Mariner's Crown, 14th floor. It had been there for 3 hours. He was settled in. He was comfortable. I went into a small, single-stall restroom by the service elevator. I locked the door. I took out the recorder. I clicked it on a tiny, red light blinked once, then went dark. It was recording. I went back to the cart, knelt, and with a small piece of black gaff tape from my pocket, I secured the recorder to the metal underside of the top tray. Right near the handle. It was invisible. It would pick up everything. I pushed the cart to the service elevator and swiped my key. The doors opened with a heavy, oily sigh. I rolled the cart in and pressed the button for 14. The elevator ride was the longest minute of my life. It was a slow, humming ascent, with every floor we passed. The air in the small metal box grew thinner. 6, 7, 8. I closed my eyes. I could feel my resolve start to wobble. A small voice, the old Hadley, whispered, "What are you doing? This is insane. Just go home. Just call him. Just—" I cut it off. I forced myself to hear it again. The audio from my car, Brielle's laugh, Paul's chuckle, Dan's voice. "They like very close. Personal attention." Sloane's text. "Your wife called. I almost had a heart attack." Dan's reply. "She's neurotic. She doesn't have a clue." The old Hadley vanished. The ice flooded back into my veins. The elevator was not a box. It was a weapon, and I was aiming it. I reminded myself of the final, crucial fact, the one that made all of this permissible, the one that allowed me to be this cold, this hard, this final. There are no children in that room. This wasn't a family I was blowing up. This was a partnership of 2 liars, and I was simply the auditor. I had every right. A high-pitched, electronic ping sounded. The doors slid open. The thick, patterned carpet of the 14th floor, the dim lighting, the lemon-scented air. It all lay before me. I pushed the cart out, the squeaky left wheel announcing my arrival. I was here. The door swung open. He stood there, not in a suit, not in a robe, but in a pair of gray sweatpants and a rumpled white t-shirt. His hair was messy, his feet were bare, His face went through three distinct, rapid emotions. First, annoyance. "I think you have the wrong." Second, blank confusion. He was processing my face, my hair, the uniform. Third, a wave of cold, abject terror. His mouth fell open. The color drained from his face, leaving it a sickly pale gray. "Hadley," he whispered. It wasn't a question. It was the sound of a man seeing a ghost. Behind him, from the king-sized bed, a voice. "Dan, who is it? Is that the wine?" Sloane Mercer sat up. She was wearing one of the hotel's plush white terry cloth robes. Her blonde hair piled on top of her head. She saw me. Her face, unlike his, didn't register fear. It hardened into a mask of pure, annoyed defiance. I didn't speak to either of them. I simply unlocked the cart's wheel and pushed it past Dan, into the suite. The squeaky wheel sounded obscenely loud in the suddenly silent room. I wheeled it to the foot of the bed, right in Sloane's line of sight, and pressed the brake, locking it in place. Then, I turned. I looked at my husband, who was still frozen in the doorway. "Hello, Mr. Foster," I said. My voice was calm, cool, and perfectly pleasant. "How is the business trip?" Dan just stared, his eyes wide. He tried to speak, but only a small, choking sound came out. "Hadley, what are you?" "Oh, for God's sake," Sloane said, swinging her legs off the bed. She stood up, tightening the robe's belt. She was trying to take control, to own the moment. "Look, I don't know who you think you are, but we are both consenting adults. You can't just—" "I'm not here to discuss your adultery," I said, cutting her off. My voice was so cold it surprised even me. "That's a symptom. We're here to discuss the fraud." I reached into the large, deep inner pocket of the maroon blazer. I pulled out the white folder, copy 2, the one from the car. I'd grabbed it before I entered the staff door. I tossed it onto the small, round table by the window. It landed with the same soft thwack it had made in our dining room. "You're not just cheating, Dan," I said, my voice clear and projecting to every corner of the room. "You are lying to your parents. You are stealing from your company, and you have been using our joint accounts to fund this. So tonight, we are all going to get very, very clear." "Hadley, no," Dan finally gasped. Finding his voice, he shut the door and rushed toward me. "No, not here. We can talk about this. Let's go outside. Let's go downstairs. We'll talk. Just you and me." He reached for my arm. I pulled away from him, my movement sharp. "No, please," he begged, his eyes darting to Sloane, who was now watching with a flicker of uncertainty. "Hadley, please, don't do this here." "You lost the right to ask for privacy," I said, my voice rising just enough to command the room. "You humiliated me in front of your entire family. You made me a joke at my own dinner table. So, no, we're not going downstairs. I am going to let someone else see exactly who you are, for just 1 minute." I reached into my blazer pocket and took out my cell phone. Dan's eyes widened. "What are you doing? Who are you calling?" I held up one finger, silencing him. I swiped to my favorites. I pressed the first name. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the cart, right next to the Black Stallion Cabernet. The phone rang. Once, twice. "Hello." Margaret's voice, thin and reedy, filled the hotel room. Dan stopped breathing. He looked at the phone as if it were a bomb. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice still bright. "It's Hadley. Hadley, dear, is everything all right? You sound strange. Where are you?" "Oh, I'm fine," I said. "I'm just here, with Dan, at the Mariner's Crown in Weston Harbor." A beat of silence. I thought, Dan's on a business trip. He's at a pitch." "That's right," I said. "I'm just looking at the pitch right now." "Mom, this is Dan's business trip for today." I angled the phone's camera toward Sloane, who instinctively tried to cover herself, her defiant mask cracking into pure, unfiltered panic. "What is that, Hadley? What's going on, Paul? Get in here." What's happening? I heard my father-in-law's muffled voice in the background. Dan, I said, turning to him. He was backed against the wall, pale and shaking. He was trapped, his wife in front of him, his mistress behind him, and his mother, his adoring mother, on the phone. This was his worst nightmare. Mom, I continued, I'm just going to read you and Dan and Sloan a few things from the file your son was so afraid to open. I picked up the folder. I opened it. Dan, let's start with July 14th. You told me you were in Phoenix, but this, I held up the credit card statement, is a $460 charge at the Bayline Hotel in San Francisco. And this, I held up the other paper, is the Vanguard Ridge travel log showing no travel, but it does show a Zoom meeting you hosted. From Denver, that's 3 lies, for one night. Hadley, stop, Dan whispered, his voice breaking. Please, I'm begging you. Sloan was just staring at me, her mouth open. She was seeing the system. She was realizing she wasn't his one and only. She was just one charge on a long list. Daniel, Margaret's voice was a shriek. Daniel, what is she talking about? Let's do August 4th, I said, my voice gaining strength. That was the trip to Des Moines. Oh, wait, no. This is a $112 charge at the Gilded Shell, right here in Weston Harbor, and here's the matching hotel receipt for a king suite, the one you expensed to the company, the one Gavin Wood also expensed a room for, the one you told me was a brutal seminar. Shut up, Dan finally yelled, lunging for the folder. I didn't flinch. I let him snatch it. It didn't matter. I had the copies. I had the originals in the safe. The data was already in my head. I looked at him, his chest heaving, clutching the papers. I looked at Sloan, who looked like she was going to be sick, and then I looked back at the phone, still broadcasting his mother's frantic questions. I was done. So here's what happens now, I said, my voice dropping back to that cold, calm, final tone. 1 tomorrow morning, I am closing our joint accounts. You can explain the fraudulent expense reports to your own company however you want. That's your problem. 2, you are going to call your mother back when I am gone, and you are going to tell her, and your father, the entire truth, every charge, every city, every lie. And if you don't, I will. And 3, you are never, ever going to speak to me again, unless it's through a lawyer. The privilege you had. The one where you got to lie to my face, and use our money, and laugh at me with your family, and trust that I was too stupid or too weak to do anything about it. That privilege is over, permanently. I took a final look at the room, the half-packed suitcase, the rumpled bed, the smell of the wine and the charcuterie I had ordered, now mingling with the stench of his panic. Dan slid down the wall and sat, hard, on the floor, his head in his hands. Sloan just stood by the bed, motionless, humiliated. I walked to the cart. I clicked the brake off. I didn't look at either of them again. I pulled the cart, with its squeaky wheel, out of the room. I left the door wide open. I left the phone on the cart, still connected to his screaming mother. I pushed the cart down the hallway, leaving the cold food, the untouched wine, and the entire, beautiful, detonated wreckage of his life behind me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to connect, share our thoughts, and hear your own stories. Please subscribe to Zoe Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people who need it.